We are live. Thank you everyone so much for joining us to watch the film. We had over 200 people on with us, which was so exciting. So I just, about 30 seconds after the film wraps up, I'm hoping that everybody's able to stay on with us to listen to about 30 to 40 minute panel discussion with the executive producer of the film. We have Chris Mosier joining us, Ann Liberman, the policy director with Athlete Ally, star of the film, Sarah Huckman from New Hampshire right now, and former Colby Sawyer College rugby player, Emmett LeBlanc, who's joining me at my apartment in Dover right now. So thanks so much everyone for staying with us. My name is Linds Jakows and my pronouns are they, them, and I live in Dover, New Hampshire. You might have caught me in the film. I had a very small cameo. That was me kicking off the non-discrimination bill's press conference. And I am so thrilled to have managed the campaign that won non-discrimination protections here in 2018. Now we need to bring that same energy this year to defeat New Hampshire's bill HB 198, which is a bill that would ban trans girls and women from participating in sports on the high school and college level in New Hampshire. All we know right now is that it will be scheduled for a hearing sometime in March. And the good news this year is that the State House is hearing testimony online via Zoom and allowing people to sign in to register their opinion for or against the bill via an online form. So Polana Belkin, who was the rock star trans justice organizer at the ACLU and is now my co-conspirator again on this bill, she's created an amazing website, transactionnh.org, that has a link to sign up for email updates. So you can sign up there to be the first to know to get our action alerts, to know what's next for that bill. Again, we're so lucky to be joined by Chris, Ann, Sarah, and Emmett. So if we could go around now in that order, Chris, Ann, Sarah, and Emmett, could all of you just introduce yourself briefly before we get into some questions? We have some prepared questions and we'll try to weave in just a few from the audience. So let's start with pronouns. What's your experience related to sports? And what else you do in the world for trans rights, and maybe your favorite hype up song when you're getting ready for your game or match, as you may.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Mosher. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am the founder of transathlete.com and also a professional athlete. I'm a 6-time member of Team USA in duathlon, triathlon. And in January of last year, I went to the Olympic trials in race walking. Totally different story, but in doing so, I became the first transgender man to make a men's Olympic trials. And so, yes, I am a transgender athlete competing at a high level. My alerts are on. And also, I am advocating for inclusion, fighting these bills. Transathlete.com/take-action has all the bills across the country and action steps that you can take to fight them, including this bad bill that we're talking about today. Oh, I'm also an executive producer of Changing the Game.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in the film. My pronouns are she, her, hers. What was the other questions? Oh gosh, Linds, I already forgot.
What you did or currently do in the world of sports and trans rights, and what's your favorite hype up song? Chris,
okay.
Back to that.
Right now, I am currently I guess you can call me a social media influencer on trans rights. I just like to get the word out to people about all the events that are going on pertaining to LGBTQ, specifically trans rights. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, currently not an athlete anymore. I am focusing on academics here at UNH. And I guess the hype up song, Eye of the Tiger. I listen to that a lot before Nordic races, all the time, actually.
That was so unexpected.
It's just one thing that my team did all the time, and then I guess I just like adapted to listening to it like right before a race. And
So good.
Chris, do you want to do your hype up song before I do my full intro? Okay. Hi, everyone. Ann Liberman, they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Policy and Programs for Athlete Ally. And for those of you who might not be familiar with our work, we work to dismantle the structures of oppression that isolate, exclude, and endanger LGBTQI plus people in sport. I am also a Muay Thai fighter and coach. I'm a 3-time national champion in 3 different weight classes. I hope to still be an active fighter. We'll see what happens after COVID. And my hype up song, which is why we're all laughing when we went live because I was sharing it, is Annie Up. So that's my walkout song when I fight.
My name is Emmett LeBlanc, and I'm 25 years old, and I'm based in New Hampshire. I went to Colby Sawyer College, and when I was in college, I got to try out rugby on the men's rugby team for the first time. And for me, that was a really big deal. It was when I began my transition from female to male. And I was respected by everyone on my team and by administration, and I was allowed to play on the men's team. Now I'm post-grad, and I work in mental health, and I do the hashtag van life, and I go hiking and camping and boondocking in the mountains, and just try to find adventures wherever I can.
Awesome. Thank you. So as the film shows, there are so many reasons that people participate in sports. And it can mean so much being part of a team and playing your sport, or in general, not just, in a competition sense. But can you tell us a little bit about what being part of a team and playing your sport meant to you on a personal level? Let's start with Sarah for this one. Then we can popcorn it. You can pass it to the next person.
I think for me, it mostly was having a sense of family. My teammates were my everything in high school. We did almost everything together. And just the feeling of being accepted and loved by them really just allowed me to be my better self, I guess. That's what really meant to be on a team and playing sports.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I had the same experience when I was a kid, from the age of 4 all the way through high school. Sport was my community, my friends, my family. No matter how different people thought that I was off the court of the field, they loved me when I was a part of the team because we had shared goals and visions. We worked together to accomplish those, and I was a good teammate, good athlete, and a good leader. And so sport was really where I felt the most like myself, regardless of what was going on in other parts of my life. It's a little different now. It's interesting coming back as an athlete who's doing individual sports. So in high school, I was playing team sports, and now I do have a triathlon team, but largely when I'm participating in an event, it's me, myself, and I, doing all of the things alone. So I still find that sense of camaraderie and that sense of community that comes with sport, which is the difference between me wanting to just go run on a weekend and to be an active, competitor and participant. Like that's really important to me because of that sense of community, camaraderie, and affiliation that I get with other people by being a part of a sport.
Emmett, what about you?
I would say for me, I had kind of a rough childhood upbringing, to be honest. Things weren't the greatest. So for me, sports were a way of like escaping all that chaos and really just being able to do one thing that felt good and made me feel good about myself. And all that other stuff didn't really matter. And so then when I got to college, I began my transition and things were really chaotic. And I knew that as soon as I stepped on the field, it was about what was on the field and none of that other stuff mattered. And that was huge for me to be able to get through a lot of stuff that I was having a hard time with.
What about you, Anne?
Yeah, what everyone has said so far really resonates with me. I was a very awkward young queer kid, and I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the early 90s. And so Pennsylvania has come a little way, but not too far. So it was really rough. And, even though I played team sports very badly, it didn't really matter because it was the only place where I really felt comfortable, where I felt like I could be in my body. And, similar to what folks have already said, where nothing else really mattered. I just was like a part of a team in a community where in other parts of my childhood, I didn't feel that way at all. So it was such a significant escape for me. And then when I found martial arts, it was like a really amazing way for me to channel my intense hyperactivity into discipline and focus, and really built a groundwork for the person I am today.
That's awesome. Those were all just such powerful experiences. Thank you so much for sharing. One thing that I think a lot about as a non-binary transgender person is so often as transgender people, we're pressured to describe our experiences of gender dysphoria, but being trans can also be just as much, if not more, about finding positive affirmation in our true gender. And often I've heard that referred to as gender euphoria. So what gives you gender euphoria or just regular joy, both inside and outside of sports? Emmett, would you start this time?
Yeah, I think the gender euphoria part for me took a little bit longer in terms of me just feeling completely comfortable with my physical, emotional, and mental self. Like combining all of those things, it took a while. And for me, I've had top surgery, and that was a big deal for me. Top surgery is the removal of the breast tissue to give the appearance of a masculine chest. And that alleviated so much dysphoria that I was able to experience euphoria for like one of the first times in my entire life. And, since that point, I've been able to go climbing and swimming and fishing and hiking and doing all these things in tank tops and shirtless and in t-shirts that are flat against my chest. And it is like the most incredible experience. And it like, you could hear it in my voice. I'm getting excited about it, just talking about it. So yeah, that's the euphoria right there.
I love that.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah?
I think I would have to say, I guess just wearing like fashion, makeup, singing, my friends, just being able to be myself really brings out gender euphoria, and being able to feel like I'm a woman, because that's who I am. I am a woman, and just doing all these other activities makes me feel more me. I guess in high school, running track and skiing was like one of my big things, just being able to be out on the field and like not really thinking about anything. Yeah, that really brought a lot of gender euphoria.
Awesome. And that's right. You're not just a skier, you're a runner. Did you play a third sport too, or am I making that up?
Okay, so I did cross country running, track and field, and Nordic skiing. So that's like 3 right there. And I also do alpine skiing and snowboarding.
Wow, such a powerhouse. What about you, Anne? What are your thoughts on gender euphoria?
Yeah, so I think for me, something that has felt really important, especially as we all have been in this global pandemic, is being around people that really affirm your identity, and being able to have really strong relationships, and not really entertaining relationships that are toxic or not affirming of who you are. And so I think part of that for me, unfortunately, was making a break with the gym that I used to train at, and trying to find other spaces that felt more inclusive and felt more like I could also help create a more inclusive environment for all LGBTQI plus folks.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I definitely have let go of some people, and in hindsight, that's like I guess my version of gender euphoria as well is not. There are very few times that I think about it in the moment, and I think part of that is that I trained myself in this sort of to not have awareness of my moments in my body for a long time in my life because they were painful, because the way that people were responding to me was not the way that I saw myself. And I can remember a couple of like very distinct moments in my history. Like I came out in 2010. And so in the last, over a decade, there have been a handful of these moments where I will catch my reflection in a mirror in a storefront and like have that just really resonate in my body as me seeing the person that I always thought that I would be. And it's interesting because it's not like when I was a kid, I didn't know that this would be me. I didn't know that there would be a future for myself. I never pictured myself past the age of 25. So it's not like I was envisioning me today, but like this feeling of just feeling whole, of feeling at one with myself. It's happened in my Team USA uniform. It's happened riding my bike just, around town. It happened when I was in the Body issue in ESPN. Kind of funny to bring up now, but I was just looking at the photos for a different presentation and, being naked in a magazine and like really seeing myself and having it be like, I'm just so grateful that this is my body, that this is my experience. I love being trans. And it's these moments after the fact where I'm not questioning myself and I'm not like overanalyzing every interaction that I'm having. I'm just existing at peace with myself. That really, in hindsight, I go, wow, that was a moment of gender euphoria, or like all of January was gender euphoria because I was having like a great time.
That's awesome. Shifting gears a little bit. Fortunately, we do have to talk about the ongoing attempts to politicize transgender people's lives. We've seen for years that there's been this focus on bathrooms, and when that didn't work, those same national forces have moved on to sports as an attempt to move their agenda of just keeping trans people from full participation in public life. I'd love to hear a little bit from each of you about how the film pushes back against those myths, and how would you do that personally? Could we start with you this time, Anne?
Sure. So I love this film for so many different reasons. I think one of the reasons why I love it so much is it speaks to so many different audiences simultaneously. So anybody watching the film can really see themselves or a family member or someone that they know in the film. And so I think the film undeniably shows the humanity of each of the students in the film in a way that is uncompromising, and it is real, and it is complex. And I think it is such a powerful piece that really changes hearts and minds. And being in different talkbacks and seeing the film now so many times, it's just amazing how it shifts people's perspectives over such a short period of time. I mean, I really wish we could force every single legislator to watch this film, because it would shift so much for them. And then I think, the piece that always really sticks out to me is, we talk a lot in our work about, and you do as well, about journey narratives. And you really see the way in which, for example, like Mac's grandmother goes on this whole journey from acceptance, but really there's so much time spent talking to her and getting her perspective, and some moments that might feel really uncomfortable for some of us watching it, but know that, like one of my favorite moments in the entire film is when she takes the picture off of the wall, and it's something that Mac has wanted for so long, and it's just such a beautiful moment. And so I think, the more that we can center trans narratives in this work, the more success we're going to have building empathy.
I think that's so true. I definitely saw that on the non-discrimination bill, and hoping we can do the same again. Chris, I would love to hear more about what you're doing with Trans Athlete to push back against those myths, and what you saw from the film as well.
Yeah, I think, one of the most powerful moments for me is when Andrea's coach says, we can't treat Andrea as a girl during the school day and then treat her like a boy after when practice starts. Like, we can't say that she's afforded all of the other rights and opportunities that every other student has, except for this one area. And to me, it just gives me goosebumps to say, like that's a really powerful idea, that it really is what's happening across the country right now, that lawmakers are trying to negate and invalidate the identity of young people. And it's heartbreaking to see so many young people testify, to share their journeys, to talk about their stories, to be public on social media, and then to have their elected officials say to their face, you aren't who you say you are, or you don't deserve the same experience as your peers. And so what I'm doing with transathlete.com is really just tracking the bills and then providing ways for every person across the country to get involved. So if you live in your state, there's action items that you can take, oftentimes working with the resources on the ground. So linking to Transaction New Hampshire. Did I get the website right? That's right. NH, right? Transaction NH, right? So the folks who are actually in this spaces doing this work, to elevate their voices and elevate their work, and then to let people know across the country how big of a problem this is. For a lot of people, it's not on their radar, but lawmakers have really made this a priority in this legislative session to attack, dehumanize, and target young kids, and not just transgender and intersex kids, but also all young women and girls. And so it's really important that we spread awareness of just how ridiculous a lot of these bills are, that it's putting young people at risk, in danger, not just losing the experience with their peers and all of the great things that everybody gets from participating in sports when you're a young person, but also real human rights violations of having their genitals inspected in some cases, their chromosomes and hormones tested, and things like that. So really just spreading awareness, transathlete.com/take-action. And then also elevating the stories of people like Sarah Rose to say, like, we are real athletes. I play sports because I love sports, but I also love who I am, and I'm not willing to compromise either one of those. No young person should have to compromise who they are in order to play the sports that they love. And I think more people need to see this film, to hear these stories, to say, like, these are kids who just want to play with their friends.
That's great. What about you, Sarah?
I think I just wanted to point out that this documentary, and in a total, is kind of it's showing that we are all human, and that we are not just our label. We are humans. We're human beings. I'm a woman. Max, a human, yes, of course he's a human. Max a male. It's just, I feel like this whole entire film presses the fact that we all are human, and that we need to be viewed as that, I guess. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this film. And as to what I'm doing to get people to know what's going on in the world about things, using social media a lot, I found actually that I've been doing a lot more face-to-face communicating with people about these issues, which is actually kind of really interesting to see the reactions in person, and them being oh my gosh, this is actually a horrible bill that we can't have passed. And I think that's just something that's super interesting and cool, that I'm able to do that in person and online.
That's awesome. Emmett, take us home on this one.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I mean, I participated in some sports growing up, but it really wasn't until college where I was able to truly be on a men's team, because once I hit puberty, I had to play on the girls' teams. I wasn't allowed to by my parents to play on the teams that I wanted to play on. So then once I had an opportunity in college, I really took it. And I think the whole point is that, you know, my college was willing to let me play. They were willing to let me do what I wanted to do, what would make me happy, you know, what would make me feel fulfilled, what would help my team as well. And that's what it comes down to is, can I play the sport? Do I have any health conditions that are going to stop me like any other athlete? But other than that, if I get a clear bill of health, I should be able to play, right? It has nothing to do with being trans. It has nothing to do with hormones or chromosomes or anything like that. But I do have to recognize my male privilege, and it's real. The fact that I'm a trans man is a big different. It's a much different story than the experience of trans girls and trans women. And if I'm able to play the sports I want to play, so should trans girls and trans women. And that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. So we've all talked to a bunch of state reps about these bills. What would you say? You're on your Zoom hearing. What would you say to a state rep who says that they're okay with the non-discrimination bill that passed a few years ago, but unsure about whether the same principle applies to sports specifically? I feel like we've already touched on this quite a bit, so we can keep our answers quick and then maybe move on to a couple of audience questions. So if people want to leave those in the chat, start thinking about some questions, you could direct those at an individual person or everybody. So Sarah, what would you say to a state rep?
I think that's hard because I would have to know with the state rep who I'm talking to. But if we're really getting down to it, I think I'd be like, trans athletes again are human. We all just want to play on the teams that we loved, and that we shouldn't be put into a box or a category that says you can't do this, you're not allowed to do this because you're different from other people, when in totality we're all the same, we're all human, and that we belong and that we matter.
Emmett, what about you?
I can't say it any better than she just said. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Co-signed, all on the same page. What about you, Anne?
I agree. All of that was great. And I just would also add that I would ask the rep, I would say, so tell me a little bit more about what you feel unsure about, and pick it apart a little bit. And most likely we would hear that this representative is worried about competitive advantage or any other, of the myriad myths and misconceptions we hear about trans athletes, but usually it's really focused on trans women and girls. And I would say, okay, so you're concerned about protecting women's sports. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Women's Sports Foundation. If you're not familiar with their work, they're an incredible organization that just released a report last year called Chasing Equity that outlines 40 plus policy recommendations about how to strengthen access to sports for women and girls. And wouldn't you know it, there's nothing about trans athletes in that entire report. And just really start to unpack some of the myths associated with specifically protecting women's sport and why people are talking about these bills.
And I'll just add, I know that, in this time, many people might not have the opportunity or might be intimidated by actually sitting down face to face with a lawmaker and having a conversation like this. So writing into your lawmaker is another great way, sending an email, sending a message through an organization, or calling and leaving a message, because your lawmaker is most likely not going to answer the phone. So you are just, delivering the message. A tip for doing that is to make it personal. So any personal affiliation or tie that you have to sports or to trans folks, add that to your letter that you'd be sending to your lawmaker. They want to know how it's really going to impact you. And so while you can use a form letter from any organization, there are plenty of them out there from state to state, to say that you oppose such and such a bill, always add your own personal touch about how much sports meant to you, or how you want your kid to have the same experiences as other people, or how diversity makes us stronger on our teams, and it's important that everyone has access. Any personal touch that you can add to that is going to be profoundly impactful, and stay with those lawmakers, because if we've learned anything from the film, it's that you can't erase those stories. Like, once you hear the stories of those of the young athletes in our film, like, you will never forget them. And so that's what lawmakers need to hear. They need to see, they need to read about. They need that personal touch from you when you reach out.
Yep, we will definitely make sure to add that personal touch. Sarah, some questions coming in for you specifically in the chat. Someone says that they were at the State House for the hearings and was so impressed with your poise and presentation, and they're wondering what you're studying at UNH now.
So what I'm studying at the University of New Hampshire is communication. Hopefully going to be directing my studies towards communication and media. And I am hopefully going to be able to keep a minor in social work. So I started off at UNH as a social work major, and then I kind of wanted to direct myself more towards the communication aspect of it and like communicating with people. So I'm hopefully going to get a minor in social work.
Amazing. And I feel like this next question or might be best answered by you, although others are welcome to chime in if they have thoughts. But the question is, how can we work to include non-binary athletes in our conversations and advocacy for trans athletes? So much of the conversations around sports are very focused on the gender binary.
This is a really great question, and I think it's one that nobody really has a great or perfect answer to. I think we've seen some really successful examples of including non-binary athletes in the running community with some third category options, but I want to be very careful when I say that, because we should never force an athlete to compete in a third category if they do not want to compete in a third category. So I think part of where we need to start with this conversation is making sure in any time we're talking about sport policy, we need to have folks who that policy is actually going to impact at the table leading the conversation. And so that could look different in different communities and depending on the sport, but we have to make sure that we're prioritizing voices of athletes who are actually going to be playing that sport in that community. And we don't see enough of that right now in policy generally, but definitely in the sport policy space.
Thank you. We've got some questions about, or some comments, and Sarah, about how wonderful your parents are and how supportive of they're shown to be throughout the film. Can you talk a little bit about your parents and their support, and what that means to you? Was it that way from the very beginning? How, or talk about your mom and your dad. Would love to hear it.
Yeah, so I have had such unconditional love and support from my parents from the very beginning. Yeah, I'm just so grateful to have them as parents and that they are loving and accepting. But I do also want to make it known that there are so many other cases in our world that there are parents who are not as supportive as my parents are. And I think that needs to be known, like in general, is that my case is special to me and that it's not the same for everybody. And I wish it could be the same for others, but that's sadly not the case. And if you do know somebody who has a family member or is in a situation that's not the best for them, just know that you should always just be like, I'm here for you, and that you are loved and accepted by everybody, no matter what is going on in your household. But yeah, Jen and Tom, my mom and dad, I love them so much, and I'm glad that they have been here for me.
All right, it looks like we have just one more question. from someone who is curious on everyone's thoughts on the way that trans stories are told in the media, whether local news or otherwise. How can we tell the best trans stories that we possibly can? Are there any other good examples that y'all want to highlight other than this film? Chris, how about you?
I think we often see, particularly in this narrative right now, in the last year, we've seen trans athletes being framed up in a really negative way. A lot of the storytelling has not been controlled by the athletes, and it's not been controlled by LGBTQ people. So it's really important that if someone is taking on a project like changing the game, that trans people are involved from start to finish. This idea of nothing about us without us, we need to have people at the table, voices present. We need to be in control of the way that our stories are being told. And I think it's also the same thing for print media as well. It's great to uplift more voices. And then we, at the same time, need to be really careful about putting people in a position where they are being tokenized or they are being, put into a spotlight. I look at the 4 young athletes in this film, and, of course, we have these athletes as part of this film because people with not supportive parents probably aren't going to let us make a documentary about them, right? So we're showing a certain type of narrative, to Sarah's point. It's important that we realize that when athletes are put into the media, that the amount of hate, and I mean, you hear it in the film from the parents, the coaches, the people in the stands, the people online and social media, the amount of hate that can come towards us is overwhelming. It's a lot. So there's this real balance that needs to be achieved in elevating stories, in sharing stories, and allowing the athletes to be in control of those stories and the trans people to be in control of those stories. Then also recognizing that it is, in a lot of ways, putting those people in harm's way. And so those people need a strong support system. We need allies to make sure that they are protected. So there's a real balancing act that needs to happen with sharing those stories.
Can I also say something real quick? Our narrative as trans athletes and trans people are our narratives, and that we hold them so dearly. And I'm glad that I'm able to share my experience and my life to thousands of people. Yet we have to remember that not everybody is willing to be that open. And with story, it comes time, and you need to let people be comfortable with the people around them and sharing that their story, because again, it is sacred to us. My story is very sacred. I bet Emmett and Chris's is, and Anne and Linds. But it's just, we have to be wary that it is our stories, and I guess we're not like an infinite dictionary for people who have like questions. Like I'm open for answering questions always, but it's like I don't speak for the entire trans community. I'm just one person, and this is my story. So that's where it comes with storytelling. You have to, I guess, find other people rather than just sticking all the questions on one person, because not everybody has the answers, I guess, if that makes sense.
All of those points are, I just want to jump in really quickly and say all of those are such incredible, important points. And I think it's also just important to point out that for the majority of history, trans folks have not been able to tell their own stories. And we've seen very specific narratives about trans and non-binary folks that are damaging, that are violent. And you see this clearly in Disclosure. If folks haven't watched Disclosure yet, I definitely would recommend everybody watch that next. And so I think it's just important to underscore that piece and what folks have been saying already, which is let trans people tell their own stories.
Emmett.
Yeah, I would say, when it comes to media, if you're going to be interviewed for something and you're a trans or non-binary person, making sure that you feel comfortable being interviewed by somebody, whether it's for print or for a visual media. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But if you do want to do it, make sure that you feel comfortable and you make sure that, the information they have is accurate. And what I mean is they're providing that your chosen name and your pronouns and not any information that you don't want out there. This is, if you're going to be interviewed by somebody, they need to respect who you are and respect the information you provide and information you don't provide. And, that's any person deserves that kind of respect. And trans people deserve that respect too. So I guess that would be my advice: is if you are going to be interviewed by media, make sure that they're going to respect you in those ways.
All right. Well, we have reached the end of our panel. Thank you so much to our 4 wonderful panelists for giving such thoughtful answers and staying with us. And I am just filled with so much hope that we'll be able to harness this energy to defeat HB 198. And thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And we'll be in touch. You can follow us, transactionnh.org, one more time. So thank you so much, panelists. Everybody have a good night. Thanks, everyone.